Get out of that chair. You're here to serve coffee, not to sit with officers. The shout echoed through the briefing room as the entire row of officers burst into laughter. The small woman quietly stood up, carrying the coffee tray, walking through contemptuous stares. But as she leaned down to serve, the light caught a silver ring on her finger. The old general froze, whispering, "That's a Navy SEAL ring." The entire room held its breath. Anna Keller was 30 years old, small in stature, with long brown hair and a face that always looked downward, as if trying to avoid every gaze. She had been assigned to the administrative department at the naval base, invisible among the clerks and support staff. In the eyes of many officers, she was just office personnel, a runner for menial tasks. They regularly gave her odd jobs, printing documents, bringing coffee, cleaning up papers. During tactical briefings, Anna would sit in the back row with the intention of taking notes and learning about operations. A lieutenant colonel, harsh and contemptuous, would snap at her. "What are you sitting there for? This is for officers. Go get coffee." Laughter would spread through the room, with some adding mockingly, "That's probably the only job she's qualified for anyway." Anna never fought back. She would simply stand up quietly and walk away. As she left the room, people would whisper, "Someone like her could never understand real combat." An old maintenance worker later recalled, "When she carried the coffee tray, I noticed her hands were calloused and scarred. Those weren't the hands of an office worker. Those were hands that had held weapons." What none of them knew was the weight Anna carried with every step, every insult, every dismissive gesture. She had once been among the most elite warriors in the military. She had completed training that broke most candidates. She had survived missions that claimed the lives of her teammates. But a single moment of hesitation during a critical operation had cost her everything she cared about. Her entire team had been killed because she had frozen for half a second when decisive action was needed. The guilt had consumed her completely. She had requested immediate discharge from special operations and asked to be assigned to the most mundane, safe position available. For 3 years, she had maintained the fiction that she was just another administrative worker. She filed papers, answered phones, and served coffee to officers who had never seen real combat. She endured their mockery because she believed she deserved it. She accepted their contempt because she felt it was fitting punishment for her failures. Every day, she watched these officers plan missions and discuss tactics, knowing she understood warfare at a level they could never reach. But she kept that knowledge buried, hidden beneath the persona of someone who had never been tested. The silver ring on her finger was the only remaining evidence of who she used to be. She wore it not as a badge of honor, but as a reminder of the people she had failed to protect. She had thought her secret was safe. She had believed her past was buried deep enough that no one would ever discover the truth. She was wrong. Anna returned to the briefing room carrying the coffee tray, her movements quiet and efficient as always. She poured each cup carefully, placing them in front of the officers who continued their tactical discussion as if she were invisible. When she leaned down to place a cup in front of the senior staff, the overhead lights caught the silver ring on her finger. A Navy SEAL ring, engraved with ocean waves and a skull, symbols that few people earn the right to wear. General Rossfield, who had been quietly observing the meeting, suddenly went rigid. He whispered, barely audible, "That's a Navy SEAL ring." The entire room fell silent. A lieutenant colonel, trying to break the tension with nervous laughter, scoffed. "A SEAL? Her? She probably bought it at a flea market." General Rossfield's voice cut through the mockery like a blade. "No one is permitted to wear that ring unless they've completed BUD/S training. She's not pretending. The whispers in the room changed tone completely. Several officers sat up straighter, their eyes focusing on Anna with new intensity. Anna said nothing. She simply finished placing the last coffee cup and stood quietly, her face expressionless, but her eyes revealing a depth of pain that no one had noticed before. A young officer later recalled, "The room was full of people, but when the general said, 'That's Seal,' I felt chills run down my spine. We had just humiliated a real warrior." The tactical briefing that had been proceeding smoothly suddenly felt different. The officers, who had been confidently discussing strategy, began to realize they might have been doing so in front of someone who understood combat at a level they had never experienced. General Rossfield studied Anna's face carefully, looking for confirmation of what the ring suggested. He saw it in her posture, the way she stood perfectly still under scrutiny, the way her eyes assessed the room automatically, the controlled breathing of someone who had been trained to remain calm under extreme pressure. "Ma'am," he said formally, "please remain after this briefing." Anna nodded once, a barely perceptible movement that somehow conveyed more military bearing than all the formal protocols being observed by the officers around her. The rest of the briefing continued, but the atmosphere had changed completely. The same officers who had been treating Anna as invisible now found their eyes drawn to her repeatedly. They began to notice things they had overlooked before. The way she stood with perfect military posture despite trying to remain inconspicuous, the way her eyes automatically tracked movement in the room, the scars on her hands that suggested extensive weapons training. When the official briefing ended and the other officers filed out, Anna remained standing in the same position, waiting for whatever would come next. General Rossfield approached her slowly, his expression serious and respectful. "I know that ring. It can't be faked. Who are you, really?" Anna was silent for a long time, then exhaled slowly. "I used to be Navy SEAL, call sign Spectre 3. During a 2014 port operation, I lost my entire team because of one mistake. I requested transfer and buried my identity." General Rossfield nodded slowly. "I've heard of Spectre 3. You saved 48 hostages from that cargo ship." The truth was finally out. The woman they had been treating as a servant was actually one of the most elite warriors in military history, and she had been hiding among them for 3 years, carrying the weight of her past failures while enduring their contempt in silence. The news spread through the naval base like wildfire. The woman they made serve coffee is Spectre 3. Officers who had mocked her competence hours earlier now avoided eye contact, ashamed of their previous behavior. One whispered to his colleague, "We've been sitting at briefings that were protected by someone like her." That evening, Anna sat alone in the courtyard, removing her Seal ring and turning it over in her hands. She whispered to herself, "I never wanted anyone to remember that name." General Rossfield appeared from the shadows and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Some titles don't belong to individuals. They belong to the people who fell alongside you." The full story emerged during their private conversation. Anna had been part of an elite SEAL team assigned to rescue hostages from a hijacked cargo ship. The operation had gone perfectly until the final moments, when she had hesitated for half a second before engaging a terrorist who had appeared unexpectedly. That moment of human uncertainty had cost her the lives of her entire 6-man team. While she had successfully completed the mission and saved all 48 hostages, the guilt of losing her brothers had destroyed her. "I should have been faster," Anna said, her voice barely audible. "If I had acted without thinking, they would still be alive." General Rossfield studied her carefully. You made a human decision in an inhuman situation. Your team knew the risks. They wouldn't want you carrying this guilt. But I am carrying it, Anna replied, and I'll carry it until I die. The general understood now why she had chosen to hide among administrative personnel. She was punishing herself by accepting a role far beneath her capabilities, enduring daily humiliation as penance for her perceived failures. Word of her true identity reached other special operations veterans throughout the military community. A former SEAL team leader sent a message through official channels. If she's still alive, she doesn't owe the world any explanations. We owe her everything. The officers who had treated her as beneath their notice began to understand the magnitude of their error. They had been dismissing someone whose combat experience exceeded their combined service records. A young lieutenant approached General Rossfield privately. "Sir, I've been making jokes about her for months. How do I apologize for something like that?" "You don't apologize with words," the general replied. "You apologize by treating her with the respect she's always deserved." Anna's personnel file, when properly examined, told a remarkable story. She had completed missions that most special operations soldiers only read about in classified briefings. She had saved lives in situations where failure would have meant international incidents. But none of that mattered to her anymore. She had traded her warrior identity for the safety of anonymity, believing that if she never again held a weapon or made a life-or-death decision, she couldn't fail anyone else. The irony wasn't lost on General Rossfield. The military had been using one of its most valuable assets to serve coffee and file paperwork, while she had been too consumed with guilt to recognize her own worth. A Navy psychiatrist who reviewed Anna's case noted, "She's been living with survivor's guilt so severe that she's essentially erased her own identity. She sees her failures as more significant than her successes, even though her success rate is extraordinary by any standard." During their continued conversations, Anna revealed the depth of her self-imposed exile. "I wake up every morning thinking about the 6 men who didn't come home, their families, their children who grew up without fathers. How do I justify being alive when they're not?" General Rossfield had seen combat trauma before, but Anna's case was unique. She hadn't been broken by what had happened to her. She had been broken by what had happened to others while under her command. "You can't bring them back by destroying yourself," he told her, "but you can honor them by using your skills to protect others." Anna looked at her SEAL ring, then back at the general. "I'm afraid that if I try again, I'll fail again. And I can't lose anyone else." The conversation that followed would determine whether Spectre 3 remained buried forever, or whether one of the military's most skilled operators could find a way to serve again without carrying the weight of perfection. The next day, Anna entered the mess hall as she had done for 3 years, but the atmosphere was completely different. No more mocking comments, no more dismissive glances, no more cruel jokes about her competence. The lieutenant colonel, who had been most vocal in humiliating her, approached her table and set down his food tray. His voice was quiet and respectful. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. If it weren't for people like you, many of us wouldn't be sitting here today." Other officers nodded respectfully as she passed through the dining area. The change wasn't dramatic or theatrical. It was the simple recognition that passes between professionals who understand sacrifice. General Rossfield stood up in the center of the mess hall, his voice carrying clearly to every corner. "Yesterday, you made a Navy SEAL serve coffee. From now on, remember this: she has paid a price higher than all of us combined." No one responded verbally, but everyone sat up straighter. And from that day forward, the chair next to Anna remained empty, a silent acknowledgement of the space that exists around someone who has carried the weight of command decisions. A young intelligence officer approached her after the meal. "Ma'am, would you be willing to review some of our tactical assessments? We obviously have a lot to learn." Anna considered the request carefully. "I'm not sure I'm qualified to guide anyone's tactical decisions anymore." "With respect, ma'am, your experience speaks for itself. We need someone who understands what real combat looks like." That afternoon, Anna found herself in a briefing room with the same officers who had once treated her as invisible. But now they listened with the attention of students learning from someone who had been tested under the most extreme conditions. She began sharing insights about special operations tactics, not as Spectre 3 the legend, but as Anna Keller, someone who had learned hard lessons about leadership, decision-making, and the weight of responsibility. General Rossfield observed from the doorway, watching as Anna slowly began to reconnect with her professional identity. She wasn't ready to return to active duty, but she was beginning to understand that her knowledge and experience could serve a purpose beyond self-punishment. For the first time in 3 years, Anna began to think that maybe her past failures didn't have to define her future completely. Maybe there was a way to honor her fallen teammates while still contributing to something meaningful. Maybe Spectre 3 and Anna Keller could coexist. People easily shout, "Get out of that chair," and laugh when they see a small woman carrying a coffee tray. But they don't know that on her hand is a Navy SEAL ring, a symbol of blood, tears, and nameless sacrifices. Anna didn't need to argue or boast. Just one glance from the general, and the entire room understood the truth. The lesson is profound. Never diminish a person just because they choose silence. They may carry a past that you wouldn't dare to face. Behind every quiet service member might be someone who has sacrificed more than we can imagine, who chooses anonymity not from weakness, but from the weight of memories too heavy to display. If you've ever seen someone quiet do something extraordinary, leave a dot in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to SN Quiet Stories to hear more tales like this.